All right, but let's get into this. You and I have covered this since all spring.
Right.
Telling everyone that this House settlement is coming. House settlement. People talk about guardrails. Where are the guardrails in college athletics? Well, here they are potentially, but it's also potentially not, and we'll explain. But the groundbreaking settlement that will forever change the way college athletics operates is now official. It closed late Friday. It was kind of a Friday afternoon news dump from Judge Claudia Wilken. She approved the landmark deal. It's between the NCAA, its most powerful conferences, and lawyers representing all Division I athletes. That's who was in this case. The House versus NCAA settlement ends 3 separate federal antitrust lawsuit cases, all of which claimed that the NCAA was illegally limiting the earning power of college athletes. Wilkins' long-awaited decision comes with less than a month remaining before the schools were planning to start cutting checks to athletes on July 1. So it gets in time. The House versus the NCAA has been touted as a means of restoring order to the big money era of college sports starting this summer. Power 4 and other Division I schools can begin directly paying their athletes.
Right.
So let's remind you what's agreed to. Okay, can we remind what is now that it's agreed to and the settlement is in? And as you'll hear from the plaintiff attorney Steve Berman here coming up, if this thing goes to court, they're going to lose and it's tens of billions of dollars,
right,
potentially. But in the end, it's a $2.8 billion settlement. So there's 3 parts to this, or 4 parts to the settlement. First is the settlement that's $2.8 billion in back pay to ex-athletes. There's also $20 billion plus in revenue sharing for future athletes every year and rising. And there are new roster rules and an enforcement arm. That's what the basis of the settlement. 3 pieces: back pay, now rev share, and then new roster rules and enforcement arm. Okay. Well, let's take them point by point. The $2.8 billion will spread out over 10 years. It comes from the NCAA and a portion of each school's NCAA tournament money moving forward. And they're going to pay back athletes from the past 10 years. That's who brought this case. This is Grant House, the swimmer, and you should have been allowing us to make no money on our name, image, and likeness, and that's what this is. So it's a distribution. They've got a formula based on players' value. Back payments will begin soon. Players of the last 10 years can apply at a portal kind of thing that they're setting up. That's now official. As for the $20 billion in revenue sharing over the next 10 years, this is a 10-year agreement. Schools must stay under an annual salary cap determined through the average of the Power 4 revenue data. First year's cap is $20.5 million per school, with escalators as high as $33 million by 2035. Schools are not required to share revenue. There is an opt-in that I'll mention earlier. You don't have to opt into this. If you're a school, university, you can opt out of this. We'll explain what that means coming up. But in the agreement, also, it should be known that $2.5 million of current Alston payments will count towards the new cap. That's important in that. All right, so the Alston case that we told you about, that was for student athletes who sued on cost of living. Like, okay, I'm getting a scholarship, and I get this, but it costs to live, and
sure.
I can't go get a job. I'm not allowed to.
I don't have time to.
And I don't have time to. While I'm going to school and playing this sport.
Right.
So that case was already settled years ago, and that pushed forward. So they already pushed forward cost of living benefits. Well, so now under this, if they're making money and they're making NIL dollars. So let's just say a player's making $500,000. He or she, the school's going to say, well, you can pay for your own meals every day, and you can pay for these cost of living benefits we were giving you out of your own pocket. And this is part of the deal.
Right.
So if you're making $500,000, I'm not going to pay for your food 3 meals a day.
Right.
You'll pay for your training.
You can pay for rent or whatever.
Right. That's on you.
And that's a house or an apartment, whatever.
And that's something the school's pushed for. Hey, if we're doing this, then we got to back off. So that now counts. The Alston payments will count towards the new cap. Okay, and then for people asking about rosters and roster structure, and this was one of the final hurdles for Judge Wilken about as far as grandfathering, the new roster limits. Schools are permitted, for school scholarships. Roster limits are going to change pretty dramatically now starting July 1. The football roster is up to 105 from 85. Mm-hmm. Men's basketball jumps from 13 to 15. Baseball is up to 34 scholarships now, up from 11.7. Walk-ons will still exist, but most schools will not, fulfill all the scholarships as far as the money goes. But you can go up to 34 in baseball, 15 in basketball, 105 in football. But walk-ons will still exist, but not nearly as many. Okay. Then there's the enforcement arm part, Noah, of the settlement. And folks, this was pushed hard by the schools and the NCAA to get this agreement across the finish line. It's designed to create an authority that will police and enforce the salary cap abusers. This is where the NCAA is now pretty much obsolete. The new College Sports Commission is coming online, and it's part of this settlement. What the goal of the enforcement arm is to stamp out salary cap abusers. We're all agreeing to $20.5 million. You can't go above that.
That's the cap.
That's the cap.
Now it can get up to 33 million. What it says 2035.
Each year there'll be a new cap,
right?
Much like in the NFL.
Exactly what we're seeing in the NFL.
Each year there's a new cap.
Right.
It's based on revenue. Because remember, the players, and you'll hear Steve Berman say this coming up, the players get 51% of revenue. Athletes do. They also are trying to stamp out the unspoken for pay-for-play deals that have hijacked the NIL marketplace with the collectives. Now, will this do that? That becomes the huge question, right? The Deloitte-backed third-party enforcement arm is part of the College Sports Commission. That commission will have a CEO that will be named. Let's not confuse that with the currently paused Presidential Commission. This is the College Sports Commission, a new formed entity coming out of this settlement that will have a CEO. People have mentioned the name Nick Saban or other people to run that, and they're going to enforce the salary cap and try to, stamp out the collectives as much as possible. The Deloitte one, the NIL Go enforcement entity, that Deloitte-run entity will approve non-school, not the salary cap dollars, but non-school booster NIL deals with athletes, and then oversee any arbitration for deals that get appealed.
Right.
And the final point that people have has been, can schools opt out? And yes is the answer. Schools have a choice to opt out of the settlement, thus prohibiting them from revenue sharing, but that's going to be at the lower levels. That's going to be at the smaller levels. All D1 schools will participate in this. That is their agreement. And schools that are opting in, because you have to opt into it now, they've spent the last year plus, bracing for this, the reckoning that's coming, which includes the revenue sharing, where it will come from, how it will be distributed. College athletics have been trending in this direction, of course. But again, 51% of that revenue, according to the agreement, will be distributed to athletes. Because people who say, well, are they going to sue now for more? And then where's the next lawsuit coming from? That's a two-part answer. But let's hear, I played it earlier, but Steve Berman, the plaintiff's attorney for the plaintiff's side, the three separate cases, he was with us on Game Time a few weeks ago and said this about that. More lawsuits coming, and what happens if this settlement doesn't happen? What if they don't get across the finish line?
So the way this settlement works, the athletes will wind up getting 50% of all athletic generated revenues. That's exactly what the pros get in any sport, football, baseball, or basketball. It's the same revenue share. So a lawyer would have to come along and say, well, I think the athletes have been damaged because they should get more money than that. Well, that's a pretty tough case, right? How are you going to argue that the college athletes, without the benefit of collective bargaining, should get more than the pros who have collective bargaining? I think that's a loser of a case. If she doesn't approve the settlement, she's told us that we're going to trial before the year end in the House case. That, I think, will not be good for the NCAA, because I think we're going to get about a $10 billion damage award. That's just going back. That doesn't do with sharing revenue going forward. We'll continue to litigate that, and I think that's when you're going to see, if the settlement's not approved, the NCAA is going to go into Congress and they have been trying to get immunity from antitrust lawsuits.
All right, so there's Steve Berman. If you want to refresh, you can go back and listen to that. That was May 22nd. You can find it at our archive and our podcast.
Good stuff.
Good 15-minute conversation with the lead plaintiff attorney on all things.
Prefacing what went down.
Yeah, getting ahead of it. So there's the lead plaintiff attorney. So it is a reality now, but listen, the powers that be in college athletics are still pushing the federal, legislation. They still want that, and there's a story on that this morning that can't be ignored. But it's now a reality. Athletic departments across the country have to deal with it. The challenge of the transition to the new world order they live in. And here, we talked about because when I asked him about future lawsuits, he said it's going to be hard to sue for the salary cap portion of it. They're getting plenty, right? They're getting 51% of revenues. Where the lawsuits are going to come are with the NIL side.
Yeah.
And the stymie of the marketplace. That's where the labor lawyers are going to come and say, no, screw this Deloitte thing. What are y'all talking about? If I, because there's a quote from an athletic.com, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times story over the weekend that from a personnel director, off the record, talking about if you tell a booster or a business owner they can't give a star player $2 million, there will be lawsuits. There's no enforcing this. F Deloitte, there's going to get even crazier. And that is why the leadership of college athletics has been lobbying in Washington, D.C. for several years now in advance of Friday's settlement for this to stick and work, as we've said, it will need to be codified by the federal government. And what that would mean would be a nationwide law that will supersede the patchwork of state-by-state laws for NIL rules right now. They need a nationwide law, blanket law that covers everything. That would supersede what goes on in Texas and Alabama and Florida. They all have their own rules right now, which is untenable. What it needs is the federal blanket legislation to provide legal cover. They also need the legal cover for the new College Sports Commission and the Deloitte-backed arm, because, what the antitrust exemption would get, if they give them what pro sports has, college sports, they would be able to, they would be, you couldn't sue them all the time. They have antitrust exemptions given by the federal government. That's the cover that they would need, or else this is just going to end up back in more lawsuits and more lawsuits.
Right.
And which is probably why, according to Yahoo's Ross Dellinger, Noah and folks, yesterday President Trump played golf with two of college sports' most influential leaders at his Trump National Club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bavacqua and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey.
Wow.
Teed it up with the Prez. And the three men obviously were expected to discuss the future of college athletics as Trump explores his involvement in the rapidly changing industry, as Ross Dellinger wrote it. Obviously, the significance of that and the importance of what those meetings can, because there's another meeting between the three planned already, apparently. That was an invite on the White House's behalf to kind of get his head around what's going on. And those, you could argue, those are the two most powerful figures in all of college athletics. The Notre Dame athletic director, who always wields a powerful stick, and Greg Sankey, who is the most powerful athletic director or commissioner of the power conferences.
Yeah, I would say Tony Petitti would be the only other person in there just because of how much power the Big Ten has, but Sankey obviously is kind of driving the
well, and most
here.
Believe that Petitti and Sankey will work together.
Sure, exactly,
on
kind of
this,
hand in hand.
One is one.
Right.
And then, so there you go. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but there's the overview. That's what has been agreed to. Those are the prongs or the avenues, and it starts July 1st. I am going to effort to get Chris Del Conte on the show here.
That'd be great.
Before the end of the month to see if we can get his thoughts on what UT is doing. They've been planning for this.
Yep.
This doesn't come as a surprise, but surprising. This was supposed to end, a lot of people thought it would close on April the 7th.
Right.
And people started to get a little bit nervous. I mean, we're all the way to June now.
Right.
We got this thing coming July 1st. Now what are we doing? But it closed on Friday afternoon. So it's the conversation surrounding the NIL go, pay for play, boosters, collectives, those things are going to be the hot topics. I think most schools are able to handle, or at least have planned for, the revenue sharing and finding that new world order, how they're going to raise those funds, how they're going to deal with that. The bigger issue is going to be these NIL dollars, which players have signed these. We just saw Texas Tech softball sign an All-American catcher from Ohio State yesterday, and bring her. If those goes through the collectives, they have to then go through the new accounting arm. Do they pass the test? And what happens if they don't? Then there's an appeal. So those things are going to be the immediate conversations, and that's again why I think the Commerce Committee, head by Ted Cruz is the leader of it, the senator from Texas. Those are the next stories to come. But now this one is in the books.
The scholarship amount specifically for baseball, you saying that number, how much? It's
34.
34.
Yes.
That one stood out to me. Obviously, it stands out to everybody, but that's.
Well, I mean, look,
think
if
Jim Schlossnagle was happy about that.
Yeah. Well, look, if you don't think Major League Baseball is in on this, and that's why they've cut their minor league system back,
right,
and they've cut the draft back. They trust me, they would like to see what the NFL has, which is a paid-for farm system.
Correct.
To develop their future players.
Yeah.
And now with 34 scholarships, more players, because look, the way that, think of it this way, like football and the football team are going to make 85% of that salary cap.
Right.
That $20.5 million. Basketball on the men's side, because it's all driven by revenue. And Title IX is not included. So all driven by revenue. So men's basketball and football create over 90% of all revenue for athletic departments. And so those two sports will get 90% of the money. The other 10% will be distributed to the rest of the athletic department. So baseball players aren't going to make a lot of money through that. They can still make their NIL deals, but now they're going to be on full scholarship.
Right.
Which
is huge.
Which is huge.
Huge.
Because 11.7 scholarships on a roster of 30 players, nobody's making a full ride.
Right.
They're paying their own way for books and other things, and so they are now under the scholarship umbrella, which will bring those Alston payments that would include cost of living. So it's a huge boon for baseball, because again, they're not going to be making the money football and basketball make, because they don't generate that revenue, but they will be under scholarship now, and which is huge so now it will encourage players to play 2, 3, 4 years of baseball and then go off to the major leagues, where we're seeing guys shoot through the farm systems on their way to Major League Baseball. Now, Paul Skeens being the best example. We just mentioned him. So, yes, 34 there, 15 in basketball, 105 in football, and there's still more to come. But that is, on a Monday morning, good, bad, and ugly, that's the plan.
And dating back to, if you're a former athlete, I texted my buddy about this. He was on the swim and dive team at LSU. I said, are you going to be getting some money back? He was there from,
you're right,
2017 to 2021. So he could probably get some cash himself. Just saying for people that are that, right?
And that's that formula about what is his value. That's
right.
That's what he'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. He'll tell you not much.
Yeah, he's going to spit out some nickels maybe. I don't know, for a swimmer at LSU.
Right. He was enjoying the tailgates of the football game a little more than, I think, the swimming and diving.
There's still a lot of fascinating conversation surrounding this, but it's now in place.
Right.
July 1st, new world order in college athletics. The NCAA as we know it is dead. Amateurism as we know it is no longer. It is college professional sports, without a doubt. But this, at least, settlement for people who hate it or whatever, it does at least save the opportunity
There's some guardrails finally.
Well, there's guardrails coming if
and
they
protection.
Especially if they get the federal legislation. There are guardrails, but they're also saving the Olympic sports.
Yeah,
this will allow the Olympic sports, track and field, and all of our Olympic sports that get funded by all of this, and that's our training ground for our future Olympians and what we do on a worldwide stage. That stays in place, and it allows it to stay in place. And they're threading the needle. They're not employees, but they're getting paid. We're a business, but we don't have employees. All that conversation that goes on. July 1st, it begins.